This is Evangelist George McTyre of the Word of God Ministry, and I want to talk for a few minutes on the subject America Unplugged. And I want to use for a foundation scripture Psalms 127, verse number 1 out of the Old Testament, reading from the King James Version. It says, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain." There have been some tragic events taking place in this nation the past year in 2012 as it pertains to the rash of mass killings that was essentially topped off on December the 14th, 2012, when a young man, 20 years old, went into a school, shot his way into a school, and killed 20 children, babies basically, uh, between the ages of 5 and 7. I think actually they were all 6. I'm not sure, but that's not the point. The fact is, these innocent little babies were killed by this deranged individual who also shot and killed 6 adults at the school, and it was later learned that he had killed his mother with one of her guns and then took the guns to the school and went in and shot his way into the school, uh, and then proceeded to carry out this slaughter. And just recently, I'm recording this as I'm today on January the 6th, and yesterday, I believe it is, somebody did a sort of a mass kill. Well, was I think about 4 people were shot and killed, among which was the gunman himself, not far from the situation place in Connecticut where these children had been killed. But let me go back and refresh your memories on on the rash of killings that I'm talking about. Prior to the December 14th shooting, on December the 11th, 22-year-old Jacob Tyler Roberts killed 2 people and himself with a stolen rifle. His motive was unknown. This was at the Clackamas Town Center in Oregon. On September the 27th, 2012, 5 were shot to death by a 16-year-old Andrew Eldinger at Accent Signage Systems in Minneapolis, Minnesota. No, he wasn't 16 years old. He was 36. I'm sorry about that. And 3 others were wounded. He went on a rampage at his job when he was notified that he was being let go. and he had gone to work evidently with the prospect of knowing what was going to happen. He had the gun on him. As soon as they told him that, he pulls the gun out and shoots and kills these people before he then retreated to a basement and shot and killed himself. On August the 5th, 2012, six Sikh temple members were killed when 40-year-old U.S. Army veteran Wade Michael Page opened fire in Gurdwara in a Gurdwara. Anyway, it was in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, in this Sikh temple. Four others were injured, and Page then turned the gun on himself. July the 20th, 2012. This one remained in our minds very well. During the midnight premiere of the movie The Dark Knight Rises in Aurora, Colorado, 24-year-old James Holmes killed 12 people and wounded 38. Holmes was arrested outside of the theater. May the 29th, 2012, Eon Stawicki opened fire on Cafe Racer Espresso in Seattle, Washington, killing five and himself after a citywide manhunt. April the 6th, 2012, Jake England, 19, and Alvin Watts, 32, shot five black men in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a racially motivated shooting spree. Three of them died. 4 days earlier, on April the 2nd, 2012, a former student, 43-year-old One L Go, or One I Go, or something like that, One Go, killed seven people at Oikos University, a Korean Christian college in Oakland, California. On February the 27th, 2012, three students were killed by Thomas T.J. Lane, another student, in a rampage at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio. Three others were injured. That totals uh, roughly about 73 people killed in what could be described as mass killings perpetrated by people that, for all intents and purposes, appeared to be normal to a lot of people, but were giving signs that they might be living on the edge. Of course, this number 73 is a relatively small number as compared to the overall murder rate in 2012 of over 3,000 people, meaning that these particular mass shootings account for less than 2% of all of the killings that have occurred in this nation in the past year. But the point is, we have a serious problem in this nation. And that problem lies in the fact that people are falling victim to those that have little or no regard for human life. Mass killings like those that I named earlier are different than most murders because, for the most part, they result from some sort of trigger that set the person off. Something occurred in their lives that pushed them over the edge and they reacted. Compare that with the idea that most of the other killings were the result of petty disputes where the perpetrator chose to use a weapon to end the dispute rather than talk it out. Then of course we have the common thug who just sees people as animals to be slaughtered, much like the predators in the jungles looking for their next meal. All of these different problems, all of these different scenarios, all these different types of people walking around, some that you can look at, and as I said, they look completely, perfectly normal, and yet and still they are a ticking time bomb. Then we have others that walk around that you just expect or know that they're going to cause trouble, but yet and still you can't do anything as long as they don't do it. As long as they aren't doing something, you can't arrest a person for looking like they're going to do something until they actually do it. So we have all of these different things going on, and we have to be vigilant as to how we are to go about to protect ourselves and our families and even our neighbors from these people. Now, in each one of these instances, the main tool that these people used in these killings were guns. Some of them were pistols. Some of them, which were known, are called assault weapons, which were also semi-automatic pistols and semi-automatic rifles and so forth. There's a whole slew of different types of guns and weapons and things that the people used in these killings, and going back over uh, the past few decades, the weapon of choice in killing a lot of people is a gun. So, what are we to make of this situation? Well, there are two trains of thought. The one thought is we need to do something to get the guns uh, out of the hands of the criminals, which I would go along with that if you could guarantee that no criminal anywhere would ever manage to get another gun. But the problem is this: you can't guarantee that a criminal will not get their hands on a gun because guns are too available as it is now. And it doesn't have to be from the fact of, like a lot of people say, the criminal can go to a gun show, like this person that killed the 20 kids, his mother was purchased all the weapons that were used to kill her and these kids. She purchased them all legally. So legally purchased guns wind up in the hands of criminals. Now, the 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 going argument is, well, if the person that purchased the gun legally hadn't didn't have the gun, then the criminal, or in this instance, this young man, would not have been able to get the gun and go around and kill people. Now, the simple thing to say is this: the gun owner, his mother, or whoever it is that has guns, if the gun is properly secured, then even if the person did steal the gun would basically be useless if it is secured or locked with a trigger lock. But somehow other people don't want to accept that. They want to do something about getting rid of the guns. And now we have the gun lobby, the NRA, and other pro-gun owners, saying, look, the guns need to be secured, but at the same time, don't pass laws to tell us we cannot purchase guns, even these assault weapons, because of the fact that if you can't stop the criminal from getting a gun, then quite frankly, what needs to happen is everybody needs to have a gun themselves to be able to protect themselves. I was just reading a story today where uh, a woman was in the house with her kids. The husband was at work. Somebody rang the doorbell and was knocking on the door and things, and the wife didn't want to answer the door because she thought it was a solicitor. But the person kept on ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door real hard. So she called her husband, and the husband told her to get their gun and go hide in a crawl space closet or something in case it is somebody trying to break in the house. Well, what happened is the person, when nobody answered the door, decided to break on in the house and go through the house looking around for something to steal, I guess. He happened to open this door to the crawl space where the woman and her kids were hiding, and she let him have it with 6 bullets out of the gun that she had. 5 of them hit him, and one missed. But can you imagine what would have happened in that situation if she hadn't had a gun? Because there's no telling what this guy was out of. He's still living and things like that, and they say he will recover from it. But the point is, we have a situation in this nation where we want to try to protect ourselves by saying we need to disarm the good people so that the criminal can't get a gun to harm us. Now, mind you, they say we're supposed to have that's what the police are for, to protect us. But the police can't be everywhere all day long with everybody. There's just not that many of them. So the thing is that we need to be able to protect ourselves. Well, then somebody says, yeah, but you don't need these type of these AR-15 type assault weapons like what the shooter used when he killed those kids and things. These weapons that fire off uh, hundreds of rounds a minute or something like that. If they're fully held back on the trigger if it's in a full automatic load. But with a semi-automatic, you don't have to cock the gun, but one time you cock it, and then when you fire it, the gun automatically ejects the bullet and reloads another bullet, and then all you have to do is squeeze the trigger a second time, and as long as you keep squeezing the trigger, the gun will keep firing until it runs out of ammo. And so the people are complaining, well, you don't need to have clips with 30 rounds or something like that. You need to have this, that, and other. A whole bunch of things are used as supposedly to try to curb the amount of damage that one person can do with a gun. And the whole thing seems to be situated on guns. It's interesting to note, and I didn't hear about this much on the news, on the same day that these 20 kids were killed in Connecticut, over in China, I believe it is, or it might have been Japan, a deranged individual went into a school over there and slashed 22 children in a school with a knife or a sword or something like that. Something that you slash people with, wasn't a gun. And so that would tell us several things. That first of all, guns are not the problem. People are the problem. And if you think that uh, just because you take guns away that there can't be any mass murders, if you take all the guns away, get the guns off the streets, if you can remember what happened in Oklahoma several years back when Timothy McVeigh and a friend of his blew up the federal building using fertilizer and kerosene, and they had made this explosive that killed 100 and some odd people, including women and children that were in a daycare center, blew half the building away. That wasn't a gun. The problem that we need to realize is that irrespective of what you try to do, if a person wants to kill a person or a group of people, they will find a way to do it. There have been instances where people have taken a car and driven it into a crowd of people and killed them. I mean, the idea of the fact that we need to disarm uh, the good people so that the criminal won't be able to get a weapon, when all we have to do is realize that the criminal will get a weapon one way or the other, some type of way or the other, even poison. I mean, where are you going to stop it at? And in each instance, uh, people say, well, the more guns there are on the street, uh, the more opportunity for crime. I just read another article today. In Florida, the rate of gun violence in Florida has dropped, get this now, 33%. Now, what do you think correlated with that rate to make it drop 33%? The article says that the amount of applications for concealed weapons permits has jumped 90%. So, what this says is that more people are carrying weapons, concealed weapons, and now the criminal does not know when he goes out to victimize somebody, whether or not this person is armed. As a result, they're backing off. They're going someplace else, wherever the threat of the perpetrator losing their lives, they don't want that, so they go someplace else. This whole notion of about the fact that carrying guns does not deter crime. Let me ask you something. How many people do you know or know of have ever tried to rob a police officer who is in uniform walking down the street or in a bank or anything else? How many of you know somebody that would actually go up to a police officer and try to rob that officer in uniform? Only a stone cold fool would do that, and many fools, even they, when they see a police officer with a gun, they would rather kill themselves than to deal with the police officer. You got a few nuts out here that would try to take on the police, but see, they got a death wish anyway. But the bottom line is this: what is it that keeps the criminal from trying to rob a police officer in uniform? It is that gun that they're wearing on their side. You ever notice when police come, the criminals usually flee? Why? Because they don't want to risk getting injured or killed. They don't want any parts of being in a gunfight with the police because somebody will be shooting back at them. They want to find someone that doesn't have a gun that they can see. And that is why, if we go around trying to pass these laws and so forth, talking about gun control, the only thing that it will accomplish is to put more of us at the mercy of the criminal. But there's still another factor, and that's why I read the scripture earlier. It says, "Except the Lord build the house, they that build it labor in vain. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain." What it's coming down to is this, people. We need somebody that is able to deal with the problems that we are facing in this nation as it pertains to uh, who who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, who's the one that's likely to uh, explode and go off and hurt people, and who's going to do this, who's going to do that, who's going to protect us. We can't have police around us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We aren't the president of the United States where his whole family's got bodyguards who are strapped with these very same weapons that most people want to uh, take out of the hands of the common individual. The the point is, we need somebody that can control these individuals to prevent them from carrying out whatever it is that they're going to carry out. And that has to be God. But you see, we want no parts of God, separation of church and state. Uh, we don't want to hear anything about what God has to say about anything. Let me tell you something. I hear people all the time talking about how they wake up in the morning and they're in their right mind. The only reason why that person is in their right mind is because God woke them up and gave them that right mind. But as people begin to distance themselves from God, to begin to ignore what God has to say about the things that they are doing or what they uh, desire to do, what they get their pleasure from, and the like, the more that people turn away from God, God will let that person's mind go. And once He lets that mind go, then that person no longer has a right mind. They have lost their right mind. When you hear people in my face, I don't know what was wrong with him. The person just went crazy. He just act like he just lost his mind. Yeah, he lost it, all right, or she lost it, all right. They lost it because God allowed them to do that. People say, "What about all these innocent people? What about them?" God knows who puts their faith and trust in Him and who does not. And while we might look at a person and say, well, that was an innocent person. Now, naturally, when it comes down to these babies and things that's being killed, uh, it's not something that the baby has done. It could be something that the parents are doing. You know, there's a whole slew of things that we never get into, we never discuss, we never want to talk about because we have essentially disconnected ourselves. That's why I use the term America is unplugged. We have disconnected ourselves from God by saying separation of church and state. Now, if you go into a house, in your house, you got a lot of appliances. Some of you may have expensive TVs, refrigerators, stereos, and the like, stoves, and whatever tools or anything else. All this stuff that runs on electricity, and it may cost a lot of money, and it's good equipment. But the thing is this: it doesn't matter how much money you pay for that equipment and how good that equipment is. If you don't plug that piece of equipment into the electric service in your house, then that piece of equipment is not going to do what it's supposed to do. It can't. Why? Because it has been disconnected. It's unplugged. You got to plug it in order to get from it what it was designed to do. By the same token, if we want this nation to be blessed, if we want this nation to prosper, if we want this nation to be what God would want it to be and what God says it can be, then we have to plug in, if you will, to God. But no, we don't want to do that. The more people talk about what we need to do as far as getting back to God, the more people get up and want to say separation of church and state, the religious right, these religious fanatics, and this, that, and the other, they try to shout them down and shut them up, attack them, and everything else. But then when it comes time when we face tragedies like what we have today, then guess what? People flock back to churches. People start praying to God and asking God to bless. But at the same time, they don't want to plug into him too long. They'll plug into him for a few minutes, but then as soon as things look like they starting to get better, they unplug again and keep on going till the next tragedy. It would seem that people would learn from the past. But see, once again, the only people that will learn from the past are those that have a right mind, those that are plugged into God, because God knows who are His, and He gives them the mind to see the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so that they can walk in it and try to tell others that they need to walk in it. But when these others keep on saying no, no, I don't want no part of your God, I don't want no part of religion, I don't want no part of this separation of church and state, they are setting themselves up for disaster. And the other thing is this: people talking about fact, going out here passing all these laws to get all these guns off the street. Listen, the scripture says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It doesn't matter what you do. If God's not in it, if God's not blessing it, then it's not going to work. I don't care if you get there's 315 million people or so in this nation. If you get every one of them to go along with what you're trying to do and take all the guns off the streets and everything else, somebody somewhere is still going to wreak havoc one way or the other, and they still might do it with guns because all they have to do is go over to Canada, go to Mexico or something, and smuggle some guns in. Because remember, criminals are criminals, and because by nature they don't abide by the laws. So here you got some people that are going to uh, make more laws for more people to be able to go against those laws and not obey them laws. It's interesting. I was thinking the other day. I said, when God made Adam and Eve, He gave them one commandment, and I'll be doggone if they didn't break that commandment. Then, sometime later, He gave His people, the children of Israel, after He set them free from Egypt, 10 commandments. And boy, they couldn't keep them. Today we got over 10,000 laws, and we can't keep them. And what is our response? Make more laws. People, we need to get plugged back into God, because the only way this mess is going to be turned around, God's going to have to do it. Man cannot do it without God. This nation can't be what we want it to be without God. We need to plug in to God. This is Evangelist George McTyre saying so long. May God bless you and your families real good. And remember this: plug in to God, more specifically, Jesus Christ. God bless you and have a blessed day in the Lord.